Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. The Bloomberg Businessweek Daily podcast with Carol Masser and Tim Stennebeck on Bloomberg Radio.
A bunch of headlines, of course, involving the Middle East throughout the day, throughout the morning. First of all, you've got the U.S. saying it would attack deeper into Iran, and the country's military capabilities are, quote unquote, evaporating as the Middle East war continues, Tim.
Also, NATO shot down a ballistic missile fired from Iran and headed toward Turkish airspace.
You've got a U.S. submarine sinking an Iranian warship in international waters. That coming from the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth here in the U.S., marking the first time since World War II that an American sub had attacked a surface vessel.
Also, a report about a possible, quote, off-ramp for President Trump in his war in Iran. So this is the backdrop for a conversation that Bloomberg's David Gura had earlier today with former U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the U.S. war and attacks on Iran. This for the Big Take podcast.
Well, look, it's certainly something that should have been anticipated. And what's one of the striking features so far is that Iran has launched far more missiles and far more drones at the Arab countries in the Gulf and in the region than it has even at Israel, disproportionately so. And in part, that's because we have bases and a presence there, but they've gone beyond that. They've gone at infrastructure that these countries have, the oil infrastructure. They want to try to inflict so much pain that we can't sustain the effort. And that's something that should have been anticipated. And David, I think we're looking at a couple of things going forward in terms of where does this go and how does this end? And it seems to me that there are two critical factors to look at, markets and munitions. Markets. Where are the oil markets? Where's the stock market? Where's the bond market? I know President Trump is very attentive to those. And if they go in a southerly direction and stay that way, or in the case of oil, in a northerly direction, that's going to be possibly a limiting factor. Then munitions. There's really a race on to figure out who expends their munitions first and fastest. Do the Iranians put us in a position where we've used up a lot of interceptors to deal with defense, or even our offensive missiles to take out their launchers, or conversely, did they run out and we still have what we need? I don't know the numbers here. I'm not privy to that, but it is something we have to be very, very attentive to because these things are not in infinite supply. The production times are very long. And of course, we're also using in many cases, very expensive weapons to take down $20,000 drones. That's not a good equation if you keep that going over time. What I'm worried about, one of the things I'm worried about, and this gets to the second and third order consequences, is we so deplete our arsenal, and it takes a long time to rebuild it, that puts us in a disadvantageous position when it comes to, say, a China or a Russia. All of those things need to be factored in. And again, it's one of the reasons why if you're going to undertake something like this, you've got to make sure that you've factored all of that in. And again, it really should start with explaining to the American people why you're doing something, why it's necessary, why now.
Do you see an off-ramp anywhere at this point?
I do, in the sense that, one, as I said, I think the off-ramp will be governed by this question of munitions and markets. Mm-hmm. And then what is that off-ramp? I think the president may simply declare victory. He'll say, got rid of the Ayatollah. We diminished or degraded or destroyed their nuclear program. Again, we did the same thing to the missile program. We did the same thing to the Navy. And as to the regime, well, over to the Iranian people. Good luck to them. Hope they succeed. And if they don't, it's their fault. If they do, we'll take the credit. How Iran responds to that remains to be seen.
And that, of course, is former U.S. Secretary of State under President Biden. That is Antony Blinken with Bloomberg's David Gura, co-host of This Weekend on Bloomberg TV, Bloomberg Radio. You can catch that on Saturdays and Sundays starting at 7 a.m. Eastern. You can also catch the entire Blinken interview in full on today's Big Take podcast. Right now, though, we want to talk with a member of our own Bloomberg News team as well.
Yeah, for more geopolitics, let's bring in Nick Wadhams. He's Bloomberg News National Security Team Leader. He joins us from the Bloomberg News Washington, D.C. Bureau. I was struck at what the former Secretary of State said at the end there, the idea of the U.S. declaring victory just based on certain things that have happened right now, the idea of an off-ramp. That his comments coupled with what you're hearing from Washington, what we're seeing out of Iran, what we're hearing from the Pentagon. What does it look like the end of this war would look like, Nick?
Well, every signal we're getting from the Pentagon and the Trump administration is that they really are nowhere near an end, that they're saying it could take many more weeks. And in fact, the Pentagon briefing we got this morning was really a discussion about how their strategy is changing. So whereas they had targeted air defenses, coastal defenses, ballistic missile launchers, anything that would pose a threat to U.S. forces and allies in the region, they're now planning to move inland now that they say they've gained control of Iran's skies and want to launch more precision strikes. So hitting that issue that former Secretary Blinken talked about there on the munitions, that they don't necessarily need to intercept as much of the Iranian outgoing missiles because they've decimated a lot of that capacity. And they're now shifting to using other weapons, dumb bombs, GPS-guided munitions that they have in very large supply. So far, the administration is not signaling what the end would look like or giving any indication that we're getting anywhere near it. In fact, they're saying that they're only going to ramp up operations over the next several days.
Hey, Nick, I get it that military strategy and any kind of war activity, it evolves, I guess, as the situation evolves. But having said that, is there any really clear messaging? I want to go back to kind of the original question about why we are there, what we're trying to achieve. And, you know, is this really our war? Or if Israel hadn't seemed so keen on doing something, would we be talking about this right now and about U.S. involvement?
Right. So there's been a lot of reporting out there that the Israelis, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, pushed the U.S. into this war and was really an instigating factor. So that's one concern. You've even seen that concern expressed from some of President Trump's most loyal supporters in the MAGA wing of his party. And the administration has given sort of succeeding, sometimes contradictory explanations for why it's doing this. Whether it's a desire for regime change, President Trump had indicated that. Then Hegseth said, you know, it's not about regime change, but the regime has changed. They've also talked about the need to eliminate the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, drone strikes. So you have seen them sort of gradually refine and shift that message over the last several days.
Wait, Nick, I just want to jump in.
Yes.
Honestly, I thought the strikes last year depleted and dismantled Iran's nuclear system and nuclear weapons capabilities.
I mean, they had said that those President Trump, the word he used was obliterated. He said that it had obliterated Iran's nuclear program. But part of the messaging you've seen them give, including President Trump in the State of the Union, was that they were continuing to rebuild that nuclear program. And that then raises the big question about the end game. So all of these capacities that the U.S. is destroying and has been targeting over the last days and then since last year on ballistic missiles, the nuclear program, drones, Iran would theoretically have the ability to reconstitute those programs over time, which then leads you to think, okay, well, the only way to get them to stop doing that is by changing the regime. But that's now what the administration is saying they don't want to do, that they're not interested in regime change. So that's why we're still asking these questions about what does success actually look like here, because you can decimate those programs. Iran has shown the capacity and the willingness in the past to reconstitute them. So the administration is not so far saying, okay, here's the end point. Now, obviously, they don't want to say that in part because they don't want to tip off the Iranians, but you get the sense that they are intentionally leaving that open-ended so they don't get boxed in one way or the other.
Hey, you know, Nick, a lot has been made of this U.S. submarine sinking an Iranian warship in international waters. First time since World War II that an American sub had attacked a surface vessel. There's that going on. But, you know, I keep thinking about what does the U.S. and Israel have to achieve for the U.S. to be more secure? If this is about national security, and this is we know a country, you know, Iran has hated America, or so we laugh, it's not funny, but, you know, chanting about death to America for a long, long time. So what do we need to do to make it so that the U.S. is actually more secure against Iran? Which I think should be kind of the end game if that's what this is all about. I don't know.
Right, and there have been a lot of questions about, you know, the U.S. strategy, because there was a big question, well, Iran did not have the capability of hitting the U.S. mainland with any ballistic missiles. So what was the imminent threat there? I think what you're seeing in the case of the Navy is one of the things that the administration wants to guard against is Iran's ability to basically choke off the flow of oil through the Straits of Hormuz. So they say, okay, we eliminate the Navy. That eliminates a major tool that Iran had to be able to threaten global shipping. So there's that issue, but the sort of second and third order consequences there of how that would impact the U.S. mainland, well, I mean, that's a bigger and sort of more open-ended question. Obviously, if Iran were able to clamp down on energy flows, that might impact oil prices at home. But of course, Iran was not going to clamp down on those flows if the United States had not attacked it. So there's also a bit of a chicken and egg situation there as well.
So is it, forgive me for putting you on the spot, but are we less secure or more secure or TBD?
Well, I mean, so some of the president's critics have argued that the way that we would be less secure is by, if you weaken the leadership and create essentially a failed state in Iran, where does that lead? Does it lead to new terrorist threats, increased refugee flows, and things like that? Well, that's a big open-ended question and a huge unknown for the future. The president's argument is no, there was an imminent threat to U.S. bases. They say that Iran had essentially held the U.S. and Israel hostage. They said it had a conventional gun to the U.S. head over a long time, and that this was a threat that they needed to deal with now that Iran was reconstituting its nuclear program, which would have posed a threat to Israel. It was developing ballistic missiles that would eventually have the ability to hit more U.S. targets, and that it continued to harass and threaten U.S. allies through the funding of proxies in the region. So they say those threats were the imminent threats that essentially needed to be dealt with now that presidents over decades had refused to tackle, and that Trump now is the one who's finally dealing with the problem. And as they say, Iran had, it was a slogan, death to America. So that was a threat they wanted to deliver on one way or another. So, it really depends sort of on whose side you're on here.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Businessweek Daily coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek Daily Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
We've been trying, Carol, to think about the economic effects and the macro effects of this continued war in Iran. President Trump's war with Iran threatens to deliver a severe blow to a global economy that's still grappling with the impact of that historic tariff hike. For Europe, sustained higher energy prices would take the economy to the brink of recession. For the U.S., they would place the Fed in an impossible position, stuck between a war that pushes inflation higher and a president demanding that interest rates come down. On that, Neel Kashkari, the president of the Minneapolis Fed, says it's too soon to see inflation impact from the Iran conflict. He spoke with Bloomberg's Michael McKee yesterday at the Bloomberg Invest Conference in New York.
Now the question I think that we are wrestling with and markets are wrestling with is, how long is this going to last? How bad is it going to get? Is it going to look more like Russia, Ukraine, or is it going to look more like Hamas attacking Israel? And that's going to have effects on monetary policy. I don't think anybody thinks when Russia invaded Ukraine and the inflation that resulted that the Fed should have just ignored that. I mean, that would have been the true transitory call. It's a one-time effect. Just look through it. I think right now it's just too soon to know what imprint this has on inflation and for how long.
That was Neel Kashkari, president of the Minneapolis Fed, yesterday at Bloomberg Invest with Mike McKee. For more of that conversation, you can check it out on the Bloomberg terminal and at Bloomberg.com. For more on the macro, the Fed, and more, we welcome back Steve Moore, co-founder of the nonprofit Unleash Prosperity. He's a former economic and senior policy advisor to President Trump back in 2016 and 2024. He served as chief economist and distinguished visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation for 12 years. He's also the author of Trumponomics, Inside the America First Plan to Revive Our Economy, and the Trump Economic Miracle. He's back here.
Hi, guys.
He just ran across town.
Is Neel Kashkari right? Is it too soon to know about the economic effects or the inflationary effects of this war?
Yeah, I think it is too early to tell. I mean, what we know from the first, 3 or 4 days is that
the worst case scenarios have not turned out, right? I mean, people were predicting maybe oil at $100 a barrel and, a crash in the economy and the stock market. We haven't seen that. Last time I checked, oil was at about $75, $76 a barrel. That's, a significant increase from where we were, but we have not seen the worst case scenario, and that's good news. But yeah, look, I think Neil is right that we don't quite know what to expect here, and I agree with his assessment. Is this a 3 or 4 week incursion, or is it, a 3-year incursion?
Yeah, so WTI crude 74.70 right now. Brent is at 81.30 right now. Still, though, those are up more than 30% this year, and we're not even 3 months into the year.
Well, look,
that's a pretty sharp uptick.
Let's be clear. I mean, a rising oil price is a bad thing for the economy. It does put pressure on inflation. It does make our economy weaker because, let's face it, energy is the master resource. Everything that we have and everything we produce depends on energy. So. But we'll see. I mean, look, thank goodness we have a president in the White House right now who's drill, baby, drill. And one thing I think investors have to understand, unlike I'm a little older than you all are. I mean, I grew up in the 70s when literally OPEC had a blade at our neck, and they could thrust us into a recession, and they could pull us out of recession. And that's not the case today. We're the biggest oil and gas producer in the world, and that has, to some extent, not fully, but to some extent, has cushioned us from the effects of Middle East oil.
Steve, I remember the odd even license plate. I was super little.
I remember that too. So you are old enough to remember that.
I was super little, but I do remember having two cars.
I think you read about it in history.
No, but 2 cars in the driveway, one with an odd and even.
Well, I remember
and we felt being
my
a
parents
lucky
and
household.
I grew up in Chicago. We would pack up in our station wagon back then, and we'd get in line, and we'd be 14th in line to get gas in the morning. So I remember those days.
But having said that, I guess what I'm wondering, and I want to go back to what Neil Kashkari told our Michael McKee, that, it's just too early to make the call. You have an incredible advantage having worked inside, with the president. And on that first day on Monday, we had a soundbite of the defense secretary saying this is going to be quick and fast and so on and so forth. And you had the president saying, we're going to take as long as it takes to do this. Do you think they had a clear strategy of how much this would take, how long it would take, how difficult this would be to do?
I really wish I could answer that question. I don't know. I mean, I did visit the president a few weeks ago, and it was clear that he had Iran on his mind back then about what to do about
Why?
Iran.
What did he say to you?
He just said, I'm trying to think about what the next step in Iran is. But, it's interesting because Trump has not been an interventionist. He ran against, a military adventurism. And yet, I really believe part of this, it was a humanitarian effort. I think he really was bothered by the tens of thousands of people that were dying under this murderous regime. So I think there was a big part of this, I really do, that was humanitarian.
But it's interesting. I mean, we can get into a big geopolitical about when presidents and governments, particularly the United States, decide to intervene and not intervene, right? And it doesn't always feel like there's a rhyme or reason or a playbook on all of this. Because it does, if you think about national security, Iran's been difficult for decades. And so you wonder about why this happened now. Why do you think this happened now?
I think it was because of the murdering that was going on of the citizens in the street. But you're right. I mean, look, there's been, as long as you and I have been in our work careers and in our early years of our life, there's been complete turmoil in the Middle East.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been nonstop. And so I think Trump would like to go down in history as the guy who brought peace and prosperity to that region. Whether he can pull that off is another matter. But I think that's one of the things that's really guiding him.
But is he, what happened to affordability for Americans guiding him as we count down to the midterms, which feels like a long time away, but we already had some primaries, right? Yeah. Just this week, just yesterday. So I'm just curious, how does this fit in? And if you were advising the president at this point, would you be like, Mr. President, you got to be thinking about what's impacting Americans?
Well, look, if the price of oil continues to go up, like we're just talking about, that makes the affordability problem harder to solve, obviously, because of oil's importance in the whole basket of goods.
I do think, look, fundamentally, I really believe we have a strong economy. We got some numbers out today from the ADP showing private sector job growth up. Government continues to shrink in terms of size. We do have the tax cut that's kicking in for people, which is a stimulus. So I remain bullish, but wars are not good for stock markets. Let's face it.
Well, it's funny that you went there. Forgive me, but it's like we do also have a president that we know that watches the stock market.
Yes.
So is there a presidential put here in terms of how long this conflict goes on that we can assume the president's going to...
I don't think Trump wants a long, protracted involvement in the Middle East. I think he wants to get in these surgical strikes, decapitate their military, and get out.
Well, he's decapitated leadership. Did the same thing in Venezuela in a different way. And your comment about the humanitarian element was interesting to me because that doesn't seem to gel with MAGA and America First. The idea, and it's kind of like an old school U.S. view, which is a term I've used with you in the past. You don't agree with the president on tariffs, you're more of an old school Republican. Is the president, in your view, splintering the Republican Party? Because there are those folks who say, we have no business getting involved in other countries' wars. We have no business getting involved in other countries' politics. We are about America first, not America alone.
Look, these are all things that I've been pondering. A lot of us have. Look, it's Donald Trump's party right now. There's no question about it. He has very, very high approval ratings with Republican voters, not so much with Democratic voters. And so my sense is that clearly Republican voters are rallying around Trump and the flag right now. And but on the other hand, none of us, we saw what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, and nobody wants to see that happen again, least of all the president of the United States. So I don't have answers to these questions because it all happened so quickly.
So let's talk a little bit about between now and the midterms. And I know the economy is what you focus on, and economics is what you focus on. If this makes the president's path and Republicans' path in the midterms more challenging, what are some priorities you believe the president needs to do, communicate to Americans for affordability, so then Republicans are successful?
Well, there's no
in
doubt.
midterms?
Affordability and bringing inflation down is the top domestic priority for the country, and the people have spoken out about that. With respect to what's going on in the Middle East right now, if by the time we come around to the midterms, which are still 6, 7, 8 months away, then and he has a happy ending here, then that'll certainly help Republicans. But I'm going to be honest with you, it's very difficult for Republicans to hold the House. It just is. Usually the average amount of seats that a out of party picks up is about 25, and Republicans have 2 or 3 seat majority. So you do the math there. It's very difficult. The Senate, I think, is even in play. I know a lot of Republicans think they've got a firm grip on it, but I'm not so sure. The most important thing Trump can do to ensure that he has a Republican Congress is to grow the economy and to deal with the affordability crisis. You're quite right. My wife, who's a Republican, she gets mad every time she goes to the grocery store. You have no idea what ground beef costs, and I have no idea what insurance costs and those kinds of things. So,
but
she's not alone.
That's right. No, she is not.
So go back to what was a focus for us last week was the State of the Union, and the president came out and said we kind of solved the affordability issues.
Yeah.
Had we?
I believe we're on the way. I think if you look at the latest inflation reports, they show it coming down. The Fed target, one of the things to think about is the Fed target has been 2%. I think the American people want 0, right? In other words, if I were advising Kevin Warsh when he comes in, don't shoot for 2, shoot for 0, because we've had so much. The reason people are angry is because the last 5 years, the price of things are up 25%.
Well, maybe that's a communication issue because the people don't necessarily understand the difference between disinflation and deflation, and they think about it like gas prices.
Yeah,
and I think that's
really right. So let me explain what you're talking about, because this is important. President Trump says this all the time. Sometimes I say it all the time. Politicians say, we're going to bring prices down. No. There's a difference between bringing prices down and bringing inflation down. In fact, we wouldn't want deflation is the worst of all things. So we want to stabilize prices and bring them down, and that's why I say let's shoot for zero.
But
and by the way, I think Kevin Warsh understands that. I believe he's going to be an inflation.
You know, people say about the affordability issue. At least we've had some guests here, Stephen. I'm curious for you to weigh in on this. Is that it's, when we talk about housing affordability and different things, we need to pay people more in terms of incomes not matching up with what we've seen in inflation. Why don't we incent more companies rather than, giving them tax breaks and then they do big stock buybacks? Why don't we incent to pay workers more?
Okay, so first of all,
spread some of the wealth around.
If you look, we just chugged the numbers. So over the last year, the average median income family in the United States has seen a $2,500 increase after inflation in their income. And that's a pretty large increase, $2,500.
What percentage increase is that?
Census data.
No, but what percentage of an income is that?
So the average family makes about $75,000. So it's maybe a 3 or 4% gain. But the point is, it's not down, it's up. Affordability is up for most people, although I bet a lot of people would object to my saying that. I'm just talking. But you asked me about the tax cut. The average family this year is going to get a $1,500 to $2,000 reduction in their taxes. So you add the increase in their before tax income in real terms, and then you add the tax cut, you're talking about a $4,000 gain. So it wasn't a tax cut for rich people. It just wasn't.
But I will say that those people are also getting hit proportionally with the tariffs too. So
that's a fair point. So
paying more
the average, this is an important point too, is that the average family is by some estimates paid about $1,200 more for tariffs. That's a fair point.
At least in the data that you're citing.
And that, by the way, is going to be a big issue as we resolve this issue of who gets the money. There's $175 billion of tariff collection.
There are a lot of lawyers being paid a lot.
That's for sure.
Hey, but before we let you go, I just want to get your thoughts on AI, because we were at an event yesterday, Bloomberg Invest, and it was an investment event, but no question the conversation was just dominated by AI. I was in a dinner with about a dozen CTOs who were painting this picture of a world where productivity is just completely shifting. I know that nobody knows the effect of AI on productivity, but how are you looking at it?
I'm looking at this as the greatest boom in productivity in the history of the world. And so that will cause adjustments, but it's exciting. I mean, you're looking at a future in the next 15 years where we're going to be seeing, every truck will be automated. We'll see people rising out of their wheelchairs and walking. We'll be of sight to the blind. I mean, this is the most exciting thing. I'm on the board of a company called Lightspeed. We build houses with robots. So we'll be able to build houses at half the cost and half the time. Think about what that's, you asked me about affordability. Think about what that's going to mean to the price of a new home. It's going to fall. So I'm mostly excited about this future.
But are you worried about the jobs dislocation?
Sure, but look, I mean, if you're concerned about jobs, that's what people said in 1920s when we invented the invention that lowered the most jobs in history was the farm tractor. I mean, it used to be 30 out of 100 Americans were working in agriculture. So that kind of adjustment has happened before, and people are going to have to be prepared for it. And look, people are afraid. They're afraid of the AI revolution. I kind of look at it as the glass half full. As long as the robots don't know how to do economics, then I'll be fine with it. It's a joke, folks.
I know. That is.
Data sets.
I will say, Mike McKee sent me a note a few weeks ago about how it was one of the jobs that is most vulnerable to AI.
I'm sorry. I'm 66, so I don't have to worry about it too much.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek Daily Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app, or watch us live on YouTube.
I want to talk a little bit about some new products from Apple that Tim is already thinking about buying.
You got to.
Rolling out the $599 MacBook Neo, biggest push for the company yet into low-end laptops. So it's really looking to go after Windows PCs and Chromebooks for budget-minded shoppers. You're budget-minded? I know about a coffee thing that you bought that wasn't so budget.
Well, that's because I don't spend all my money on computers. I can buy expensive
I'm sorry.
coffee
Did I say that out loud?
That's fine.
Everyone listening?
That was a gift.
Is Dad listening?
He is.
It was a gift.
Yeah, that was a gift.
Aw, okay.
Bloomberg News consumer tech reporter Samantha Kelly joins us here in the studio. $599, a price point for a Mac that I think is not familiar to anyone.
Yeah.
Because that's so inexpensive. It kind of puts it on par with Chromebooks and with some like lower end Windows PCs.
Yeah.
What can it do?
Yeah, so this is still very much a Mac computer. It looks like a MacBook. It's a little bit slimmer. The display is a little bit slimmer, but it's still light, fits in your bag. It does almost everything that you would expect from a higher end MacBook Air. However, the computing, the processor isn't quite there, but anything you would need, navigating the web, documents, some light editing, basically to your point, like a substitute alternative for a Chromebook or a lower end PC.
Are people going to go for it for consumers? Like, have we been looking for this?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think like students, schools, kids are using Chromebooks, businesses, I think casual users. I mean, a MacBook Air starts at $1,100. This is $600 and you're getting
like popping on the plane, watching movies.
Yeah, and the colors are fun.
Well, will you be able to watch movies?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But,
go ahead. Absolutely.
But it also kind of is in the iPad's turf, which is interesting.
Yeah, yes. It's one of the reasons why Apple has delayed this for so long. And they actually announced a new iPad Air this week that is also the same price, $600. Oh. But, people, it's a different form factor. So, you could be on the couch, you could have, a keyboard connected, but not everybody wants that.
Yeah.
You could have a laptop experience for, half the price almost.
So why shouldn't someone get this? Like, why shouldn't I get this? And should I go for a $1,200 computer instead?
Yeah, I think it depends how you're going to use it. If you're like a heavy user, if you have, heavy, if you're a gamer, if you have like projects, if you're a professional, like an artist or something like that, you're not going to want. But if you're just going to, if you're taking notes in class or if you're going to bring a computer on the weekend, you want to check your work email, it's basically does everything you really need. And what's really interesting is it now is powered by an iPhone chip, which is one of the reasons why they were able to keep it lower. The same chip from an iPhone 16 Pro, which is not that old, is now powering this laptop. Just kind of goes to show the efficiency, how they're able to make such powerful chips now.
Yeah.
And now they can put it in new products.
Yeah, they can do it. And it comes in citrus, silver, indigo, and blush color options. Which one will you maybe purchase?
I don't know, but I'm looking at Apple stock. It's down 0.2%. And it's not, launched. You can't really look at Apple stock on a launch day. We always do that when there's a big launch day in September or something and the new iPhone is unveiled. Yeah. One thing we do though is, or one thing we don't do is really pay that much attention to this revenue line. When we're looking at company earnings. I mean, people care about services. They care about iPhone. And does that, it's surprising to me that we're talking about a new Mac when, investors care most about those much bigger categories.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting, well, first of all, the Mac in general, the category was down over the holiday season. But I think this is also a bigger play to just get more people into the ecosystem. Yeah. You might have an iPhone.
It goes after a whole different market.
100%.
This is way cheaper than an iPhone.
Yeah. You might then you might have, you finally get this and then you're like, you know what? I should probably have an Apple Watch at this point. And it kind of like opens the door to more.
It's a gateway drug.
Guilty. Because if you think about it, like we have a home that's got the laptops, that has the iPads. Like once you kind of lean into that Apple world and universe, you just kind of keep adding on. You just do, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, same thing?
Yeah, you still have the first Apple Watch though. That's the difference between us.
It was the second iteration. And
You've been wearing that lately.
I have yet to update. I've actually gone old school, on watches all of a sudden. And I don't know, but we'll think. But I do think about, there's got to be a point where Apple says, listen, we've got the Apple lovers, full disclosure, and we're pretty transparent about it.
Yeah.
But at some point, you've got to figure out how do you grow your market, right? And who you can go after.
Well, that's exactly it. So, and it's also, you might have an iPad, you might have an iPhone or something like that, but these MacBooks are expensive. So maybe you have it, maybe a partner has it, but do you really want your 14-year-old kid to have a high-end MacBook? No, but how about a yellow MacBook Neo? It's kind of that perfect little harmony in between.
Except they go to college and then they need to do spreadsheets and stupid stuff.
Well, you could do that on this.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, it's very much a functional laptop.
Does it
sure.
solve? I'm going to pull a Mark Gurman here. Does it solve Apple's AI problem?
It's interesting you say that. No, it certainly doesn't. It says in some ways that it will, some of the computing power behind it will be able to better handle AI in the future. I think I really do think it's going to attract more people. I think it's going to have some purchasing power, but no, there are lots of other AI problems that they're still working through for sure.
What does it mean? As we said, this gives Apple the ability to go after a different part of the marketplace and then maybe get people into the Apple universe. Having said that, what else are we anticipating comes at a cheaper price point?
Yeah. Well, this week they announced, this is just one of several different products that they announced this week. So we also had the iPhone 17e, which is its budget line, also at a more affordable price as well. Does less, that you would want in like a Pro or even a traditional basic line. No, it's sort of like, and it competes more with other budget phones out there like Samsung. There's like A series, and so it's kind of just lowering or rather, it's just making the playing field. It's giving something for everybody in many ways. And so we've seen that in different categories, but we haven't seen that with the MacBook. And this iPhone is just another iteration. It looks just like the previous version, really.
I'm going back to the new laptop because it has a headphone jack.
Yeah.
Which iPhones haven't had for years.
Yeah, it's funny. They
That's
said
kinda
that.
weird.
Yeah, they said that this morning. Usually they have these flashy keynotes, and this was kind of very much a dial down. We were all standing. I don't think I've ever stood for an Apple keynote before. We were in this like tiny little room.
You did this in New York?
It was in New York. Yeah. It was here, and they had demos. We were able to try out the new products, and they showed the video, and you're looking at everyone's like, oh, the colors are very fun, and then they mentioned the headphone jack, and I was just like, oh, that's interesting. Just as they're moving, obviously toward wire, AirPods, it's different lineup there, but it is
having lost
still there.
4 or
Here's
5.
Here's the thing about
my husband actually bought me a wire, like a cord.
You were wearing them yesterday.
Yeah,
and
she has these AirPod cords. Yeah. They make
Bright
the AirPods.
orange.
They make the AirPods into wired headphones.
So basically, you put it around your neck, right?
Yeah.
You put them in.
Yeah.
So it's all the convenience of AirPods with none of the convenience.
Do you want to know what's crazy? Is I was walking into the Bloomberg Invest event, and then all of a sudden I look, I'm like, shoot, I lost one.
Yeah.
And so luckily we just went back. It must have slipped out. I must not have had it in tight enough. But I'm like,
that's funny.
I can't go home to my husband and say,
Yeah, right.
lost again.
Again.
Because he's like, just get headphones. Like, just do it.
I do have Apple Care for AirPods, though, and I think that covers.
But
Does
think
it
about
even
it
when you lose them?
I don't know.
No.
If you're a budget shopper, though, you might not have AirPods. You would need a headphone jack.
Good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
What's old is new again.
All right.
In technology
Cool.
sometimes.
Check this one out.
Great stuff. Samantha.
You get with an education discount, you can get this laptop for $499.
Are you citrus kind of guy?
$100
Indigo,
off.
blush,
I don't-
silver.
The price is right.
Come on.
It doesn't matter.
Lean into your blush
You can get a
side.
6-pack of these for like the price of a
Yeah,
couple
you can be
computers.
bold with the color. It's like
can be
you
bold.
can just
Citrus.
It's okay. Yeah,
He's not going to do citrus.
summer, leading into the summer.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Businessweek Daily coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek Daily Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Got some economic news this morning that did impact the trade on this Wednesday. Let's get to it with Molly Smith. She's Bloomberg News economics editor. She, like we, are poring over the Beige Book. Good to have you here in studio.
I'm on page 3.
Good
Already.
for you. All right,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Speed
What a
Reader.
fast
over there.
reader.
Yeah, a little show off.
Total show off.
What jumps out for you?
Honestly, it sounds like more of the same.
Yeah.
I know that's not very newsy, but that's what I'm reading, at least so far. But, Tim's faster than me, so maybe he's seen something different on page 5 by now.
Well, I go to page 2 and I go to prices because I'm interested in what these districts are reporting when it comes to inflation. Prices increased moderately in recent weeks, with 8 districts reporting moderate price growth and 4 seeing slight or modest increases. Many districts reported that costs rose across several non-labor inputs, including insurance, utilities, and energy, metals, and other raw materials. An issue for inflation, or is that to be expected?
I mean, I think that the worrisome sign about that is that, remember, this all happened before the war in Iran started over the weekend. So those are really things that you might start to think about, particularly on the energy side, as far as like what might be a risk for the inflation outlook here domestically. Should this be a more prolonged conflict? If we really start to see a sustained energy shock in oil and gas markets. Too soon to say that just yet. And of course, if this starts to impact other parts of the supply chain and logistics, we're just not seeing that yet. But so far, it seems like this is a fairly benign looking Beige Book. Also on the employment side, stable is what most districts seem to report. And that's exactly what the Fed wants to see. And that really jives with the characterization that Powell and others have been saying, that the labor market appears to be stabilizing. Got that a little bit with ADP this morning, and will probably we'll try to see that with the jobs report on Friday as well, but there might be a little bit of noise with some other factors in that one.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. I mean, that they highlighted things about firms continuing to pass tariff-related cost increases through to their customers. Others began to do so after having absorbed previous increases. And we thought we would get to a point in the stage where companies were like, got to move it along, got to move it along. And the other thing I think is interesting is in terms of labor, we saw wages rising at a modest or moderate pace in most districts, firms competing for talent in select areas, including the skilled trade. So, it just, to me, Molly, reminds what I feel like a lot of guests come say, that we're not quite there on inflation, and it feels like the scales are tipped that it could go higher. That's even backing out the war in Iran.
Totally. And I feel like what we've seen in the latest, the last couple of producer price indexes, so this is the wholesale inflation level, they've been very firm. You're not seeing that as much on the consumer price side, but PPI tends to lead what consumer prices see. So it's really just a matter of time then, if firms are seeing these increased input costs, that you usually somewhere down the next couple of months, that usually does translate to consumer prices.
Any of this, and we're going to talk about this at 3 o'clock with Steve Moore, a former economic advisor to President Trump. Fed Governor Stephen Miron said it's still appropriate to continue cutting rates.
Wait, he does?
Yeah.
What?
Well,
shocker.
I know.
Sorry.
But it does raise a question if anything that could happen, at least on a macro level, not just in the U.S., but outside of the U.S., with Iran, with prices as increasing because of shipping issues, because of, I don't know, what happens with energy, if that changes his view or changes anyone on the Fed view who is actually dovish right now.
I mean, I think we've known for a while Myron's an outlier here.
Yeah.
So we'll leave
Hence
his
why Carol was like, really?
Welcome to the show, Captain Obvious.
We will put
you talking to me?
I kid.
We'll put his views
Tough
over
crowd.
in one bucket. But for
tough.
everybody else,
Yeah.
definitely much more wary of the inflation risks to the mandate, which is why the stance to keep rates on hold right now really is the pervasive view, and that especially with what we've seen with the labor market recently, there do seem to be signs more validating that stabilization stance. This doesn't call for a job market that needs immediate rescue in any way.
I want to ask you about going to the overall economic activity. And they said activity increased at a slight to moderate pace in 7 of the 12 Federal Reserve districts, while the number of districts reporting flat or declining activity increased from 4 in the prior period to 5 in the current. And they said although consumer spending increased slightly in balance, 2 districts reported ongoing declines. Many noted that sales were dampened by economic uncertainty, increased price sensitivity, and lower income consumers pulling back on spending. And again, not a new narrative, but you do wonder if there's still this feeling of unease. And should we assume this is prior to what happened last weekend in terms of the invasion on Iraq? None of that is included in here.
Yeah, no, this is before the Iran war. So this is
Iran.
Right.
Sorry if I said
Yes.
Iraq.
No. Yeah. We're
I remember that one
behind us.
I remember that one too. Sorry, but go ahead.
That's all right. I mean, I think, there have been some economists lately who have raised some doubts about what we call this K-shaped economy.
Yeah.
So that idea that wealthier consumers are propelling all of spending right now and that lower income consumers are really falling behind. I think where their doubt stems from, not so much that the wealthy are continuing to spend, but just how much low income consumers are not spending as much. How much are they pulling back? Mm-hmm. And when you see, I mean, granted, all of this is anecdotal data. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't have any hard numbers in this report. This is just what Fed presidents and their districts observe as far as activity in their areas. That still speaks to, though, that this trend is very much still happening. Yeah. And you do see evidence in the hard data that would support the idea that lower income consumers are spending less.
All right, going to leave it there. Listen, thank you so much. We're on to, though, the jobs report. Just real quickly before I let you go, what are we anticipating on Friday?
It's going to be a tough read, I think. The payrolls number, there was significant strike activity in February, as well as winter weather that could make the payrolls figure a little messy. So we're looking at the unemployment rate to keep it clean.
This is the Bloomberg Businessweek Daily podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.